Okay, we're going to discuss how to use chronological organization, which you might need to use for all or part of your second paper. Chronological order simply refers to organizing a discussion according to the sequential order in which events occurred. In other words, it follows time. What happens first, what happens second, what happens third. Chronological order is often used for biographies or to relate historical events. It's also used for portions of papers that provide instructions or discuss process descriptions, and might be used for portions of papers that discuss illnesses. One of the things to keep in mind that's very important about chronological order, whether it's for your entire paper or just a section of the paper, your organization will not be emphatic. The most important events might not be those that occurred last. It might be something that occurred in the middle of a situation. I can give you a prime example. Let's say that you're writing a biography of a former U.S. president who did other things after he was president. Let's take Jimmy Carter as an example, okay? If you're writing a biography on Jimmy Carter, you would start with a short section on basic information about where he was born and educated. Then you might have a short section on what he did as governor. But the longest section is going to be devoted to what he did when he was president of the United States. There would probably be, for example, a fairly lengthy discussion of his coordinating the talks between Anwar Sadat and Menachem Begin that led to the peace treaty between Egypt and Israel, for which he was nominated for a Nobel Prize. There would undoubtedly be a fairly lengthy discussion of the 1978-79 Iran hostage crisis that he was heavily involved in. But then after you finish discussing his presidency, you probably will talk about, since he's still alive, you won't be talking about his death, but you will be talking about some of the stuff that he's done after he was president. He's been involved in some diplomatic situations, and mainly he's known for his work with Habitat for Humanity. But since he's mainly known for, and his most influential activities occurred when he was president, which would be in the middle of the paper, that most likely would be the section that would be the longest because you would have the most data for it. That's not emphatic order, because emphatic order states that whatever you discuss last should be the most important aspect, and therefore should be the longest and have the most data. Chronological order is not like that. The longest part of your paper and the part that you had the most data for is going to be what is most significant. And since you're organizing things according to the time that they occurred, it might not be the last thing in your paper. So keep that in mind. It's very important. Okay. If you're doing a paper that the entire paper is based on chronological order, here's how you would go about it. You would open with one of the 6 methods of introduction that are discussed on the Introduction and Conclusions handout. Depending on what you're talking about, you might want to use a story, which is an anecdotal introduction, or a contrast introduction. But really, a broad statement introduction, such as the one that we used in paper 1, is always acceptable in academic writing, and in many cases it's the best choice. So don't feel that you have to use something other than broad statement introduction, because you don't. Now, the introduction will end with a claim, but the claim would be a little bit tricky because you're not going to list everything that a person does. The reasons that you put in the plan of development would, or that are associated with an historical event. the plan of development is going to reflect the organization of the paper, but it's particularly going to emphasize the most important event or the most important person in a period's life. And what is most important is something that you are going to determine by the focus of your paper. Now, we just talked about a biography, but a biography isn't the only thing the chronological organization is used for. Obviously, it's used for historical events. Let's say that you're writing a paper on the Civil War. Now, there are a number of things that your research might lead you to emphasize in that paper. You might emphasize what led up to the Civil War. You might emphasize the Battle of Gettysburg, which was a major turning point that led to, that was kind of the beginning of the end for the South. You might emphasize Sherman's march through the South. Okay? So you want to make sure that your plan of development focuses mainly on whatever you're emphasizing. There's nothing There's nothing at all wrong with having a plan of development that states that the Civil War was characterized by disagreements about states' rights versus a strong central government, secession of southern states, a number of battles, and Sherman's march through the South, if you're going to emphasize Sherman's march, or the Gettysburg battle, if that's what you're going to emphasize. But you don't even really need to go into that much detail. You could just say that something along the lines of the most important events of the Civil War were connected with Sherman's march through the South, which included battles at, and then name a couple of places that the battles are held at. The claim for a paper in chronological order might be a little bit different, and if you have any questions about how to write the claim, of course, don't hesitate a moment to email me about it, because if I know what topic you're working with, I can probably guide you a little bit better. Usually you don't need a lot of background. Now, there are some exceptions, particularly if you're overall writing a paper on a process or instructions, where most of the paper is chronological, but the opening parts of the paper would not be. In cases like that, you'll need background. Most of the time, you probably won't, because when you're covering an historical event or a biography, I mean, really, in a way, it is all background, right? But if you do believe that some background is needed to explain briefly what led up to an event, or to explain briefly what a particular role in society is, for example, let's say you write a biography, for whatever reason, of the Secretary of Homeland Security. You might want a little background explaining what Homeland Security is and how it was developed. But by and large, most papers don't need background. Again, if you have questions, make sure you email me and ask me. So then we move into the body of the paper, and it's very simple. You discuss first what occurred first. You discuss next what occurred next. And you continue with that order until you reach the discussion of whatever occurred last. And like I said, it will not necessarily be in emphatic order. And of course, you'll have a conclusion at the end of it that refers back to your introduction as outlined in the introduction and conclusions handout. It's really not a complicated organizational scheme to follow. In fact, you probably know what chronological organization is and are wondering why I'm even giving you a video on it. But I wanted to make sure to go over what you need for your paper, and I wanted to make sure that you understood that this paper is not going to be in emphatic order, and you shouldn't try to force it into emphatic order because that's not the kind of paper it is. Okay. As always, if you have any questions or if you want me to take a look at a draft or whatever, don't hesitate 1 minute to get in touch with me. You can contact me by emailing me at deborah.oakey@csn.edu. And of course, you have to email me from an account other than Canvas, right? Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much for viewing this short video. I hope it helps you. And I hope you have some time to get out and enjoy yourself a little bit today. Thank you.